Chapter 2, Lesson 1, Decimals and Fractions. Our content target, students will understand that numbers can be expressed in decimals or fractions. Our language target, how we'll do that today, is students will demonstrate this understanding by converting decimals to fractions and vice versa. So decimals like 25 hundredths, 15 hundredths, 31 hundredths, and 29 hundredths can be written as fractions with denominators of 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. Any number that can be written as a fraction is a rational number. Decimals like 3 and 25 hundredths, 26 and 82 hundredths, and 125 and 54 hundredths can be written as mixed numbers in simplest form. So we're going to write each decimal as a fraction in simplest form. So for today, I want you to notice that 6/10 has one number after it. In case we have one number, that means that is the 10th place value. So that means we write it as a fraction of 6/10. Now to put this into simplest form as a fraction, I can use my pineapple upside down cake method. I remember my numbers of 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11. I know both numbers are even, so if I use 2, 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 5 is 10, and 6/10 in simplest form would be 3/5. So we're changing our decimal to a fraction, one number, 1 0, 6/10. The number doesn't change. Let's look at another one. Here I have 45 hundredths. Now this time I have two numbers, so that means my denominator is going to have 2 zeros. So as a fraction, that would be 45 hundredths. So to put this in the simplest form, I'm going to use my pineapple upside down cake method. My numbers are 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11. Those are the first 5 prime numbers that we're going to use for factoring. So I notice that both end in a 5 or 0, so I know that 5 is a factor. I know 5 times 9 is 45. I know 5 times 20 is 100. Are there any numbers that go into 9 and 20? Well, 2 goes into 20, but not 9. 3 goes into 9, but not 20. 5 goes into 20, but not 9. 7 doesn't go into either one. And 11's more than 9, so it doesn't work. So 45 hundredths in simplest form is 9/20. Use your pineapple upside down cake method. For this one, we have 375 thousandths. That's a big number. So 1, 2, 3 numbers here. That means that I have 3 zeros on my denominator. So I have thousandths. 375, that number stays the same at the top. Again, I'd use my pineapple upside down cake method. 375 and 1,000. These numbers get really big. So again, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11. Again, I'll use 5. I might need a calculator for this. So if I bring up my calculator, 375 divided by 5 is 75. And 200. Now I know that both end in 5 and 0, so I know 5 is a factor again. 5 goes into 75 15 times. 5 goes into 200 40 times. I know here's a 5, here's a 0, so I know that 5 is a factor again. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 8 is 40. So 375 thousandths in simplest form is 3/8. Now I know that that's a lot. You can use a calculator to help you divide by taking 375 divided by 100 or 1000, and that gives you your decimal. But we already have that. But there are other fraction calculators that you can have, like a decimal to fraction or a fraction to decimal. So here's our got it problems. I'm going to do 2 and I'm going to leave you to do the last one. So the first one here, A 8/10, can be written as 8, one number, 1 0. So I do my pineapple upside down cake method. Again, I use 1, oops. I'm going to use 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11 to help me do this. So I know that both of these numbers are even, so 2 is a factor. 2 times 4 is 10. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 5 is 10. So 8/10 in simplest form is 4/5. Now letter C is 125 thousandths, 3 numbers, 3 zeros. So again, 125 and 1000. Pineapple upside down cake method. 5 and 0, so I know 5 is a factor. 5 times 25 is 125. 5 times 200 is 1000. Here I have a 5 and a 0 again, so I know 5 is a factor. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 40 is 200. Again, I have a 5 and a 0, so I know 5 is a factor. 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 times 8 is 40. So 125 thousandths in simplest form is 1/8. Now, I want you to try letter B. Please pause for just a moment and work that problem out. So in number 4, the average length of a conch shell is 9 85 hundredths inches. Express 9.85 as a mixed number in simplest form. So here we have 2 parts. We've got a whole number and a decimal. So this is like saying 9 plus 0.85. The 9 is going to stay the same no matter what. Whether it's a fraction or if it's a decimal, it's 9. But the 85 here is our decimal, so it's part of a number. 85 hundredths is the same as 85 over 100. 2 numbers, 2 zeros. So to put this in the simplest form, again, I do my pineapple upside down cake method. I use my numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11. I know that they both end in 5 or 0, so that 5 is a factor. 5 times 17 is 85. 5 times 20 is 100. 17, 2 does not go into 17, 3 doesn't go into 17, 5 does not go into 17, neither does 7, and neither does 11. 17 is a prime number, so in this case, we are finished. So our fraction is 17/20. But don't forget about the whole number. We have to include it, so it comes over, and it is our large number here. So 9 85 hundredths in simplest form is 9 17/20. So here's our got it problem. It says it takes approximately 4 65 hundredths quarts of milk to make a pound of cheese. Express this amount as a mixed number in simplest form. So 4.65, that's the same as 4 plus 0.65. 0.65 as a fraction, there's two numbers, so that would be 65 over 100 because two numbers, two zeros. So to put this in the simplest form, again, I do my pineapple upside down cake method. Again, I write my numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11. Both end in a 5 and a 0, so I know 5 is a factor. 5 times 13 is 65. 5 times 20 is 100. Is there any number that goes into 13 evenly? No, because the next prime number would be 13. So here's my fraction in simplest form. 13/20. But I have to remember the 4 that's still a part of that number, so it goes outside the number. So 4 and 65/100 in simplest form is 4 and 13/20. So now we come to the point where we're going to write 9/12 as a decimal. There's two ways to do this. One, we can divide, which is taking the numerator 9 and putting it inside the box and dividing that by 12 on the outside. Since I know that 12 does not go into 9 evenly, I put a decimal and add a 0. And I keep adding zeros until I am finished dividing. So if I look at my multiplication chart, I know that 12 times 7 is 84. So I subtract. I'm going to regroup. 10 minus 4 is 6. Since there's no number here to bring down, I add another 0. Zeros don't change our value. And 12 goes into 60, ends in a 0, so it must be 5. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 more is 6. I subtract, I get zeros. So 9/12 as a decimal is 0.75. So again, when I write these as a decimal, I can divide. I take the numerator. I take 3 and I divide that by 5. So again, 5 does not go into 3, so I add a decimal and a 0. 5 goes into 30 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30. I subtract, which is 0. Now, as numbers get larger, it's harder to do, so you might use a calculator. Here's one for letter F, 14/25. Here's a fraction to decimal calculator. So what I do is I type in my numerator, which is 14, my denominator, which was 25, and I hit calculate. Now, calculator soup, this will be on your Google Classroom when we send this out. So I hit calculate, and down below you can see here's my answer, 0.56. So again, I'm going to do the same thing with 102 over 25. I go back to my calculator, 102 to 250. I hit calculate, and again it tells me my answer right here, which is 0.408. Now this 0 in front is just a placeholder. It can be added there or you can use it without.